You're watching City Channel 4, your window to our community.
Welcome, and thank you so much for coming to tonight's Geneva lecture. I'm Ed Larman, Director of Geneva Campus Ministry, and there's a little more information about us in the back if you want to check that out later. Before I forget, please remember to turn off your cell phones and other things that go beep in the night. And the sponsors of the Geneva Lecture Series believe that the way that we see the world, our worldview, is crucial to the way we live our lives and relate to others and conduct our studies and our work, serve the community. So we want to offer to the university community and to the wider community a Christian perspective on life, work, culture, the issues of the day. Since 1976, we've brought over 70 scholars, artists, practitioners in a wide variety of fields to speak at the university. And you can see them listed in the brochure that you were given when you came in. Also, I just want to call your attention to the little questionnaire that was given to you. We will plead with you a little later to please fill that out. It won't take long. It really will help us. And then you can hand that in at the end. I want to take a moment to thank the Geneva Lecture Committee listed in the brochure, and especially Joe Seelick, who was instrumental in arranging this. My ministry coordinator, Catherine Domish. I get to stand up here, and she does all the work, so it's a great deal for me. And our contributors listed in the brochure, City Channel 4 for taping this event, and welcome to our future television audience. Also, Professor David Herwald and members of his graphic design class. Some of you just came in. Are you from David's class? No. They're coming down from Wartburg, so hopefully they'll be joining us soon. And also Professor David Gould. We're really piggybacking off of our speaker's appearance in his amazing class today, the Life Design class. So this all worked out well. Tonight we have a double feature, two speakers, and they don't really fit neatly into one little field of topic. One little field of study or one topic. They have a wide range of experience and concern about things that matter a lot to us human beings. Living lives that matter, tapping into our creativity, finding balance in our work lives and our personal lives, creating a work environment that is meaningful and contributes to the good of the community, both locally and globally. Exploring the richness of the arts, having a faith to live by that connects us to the source of the good, the true, and the beautiful. These are the passions of Justin Ahrens and Bob Davidson. Justin Ahrens is a graphic artist by profession. He's the founder and creative director of the design firm Rule29, which is located in, where else? Geneva, Illinois, so you know it was meant to be. And the company is committed to making creative matter. In fact, that phrase is their patented trademark. So, Justin, does that mean I have to pay you for saying that phrase? Okay, oh boy. I'm going to try not to say it again. It could be expensive. But Rule29 is quite a young company, but they have some major clients like Allstate, Kmart, Alice Cooper, yes, Alice Cooper, but they also donate 20% of their time for pro bono or reduced rate work for nonprofit corporations, both locally and in 6 African countries. So hopefully you'll hear a little bit more about that later. Justin is the author of the book Life Kerning, Creative Ways to fine-tune your perspective on career and life. Fine and helpful book, and I learned something. I didn't know what kerning was, but kerning is adjusting the white spaces. There's our crew from Wartburg. Welcome. Glad you made it. Kerning is adjusting. Get me a correct me if I'm wrong, but the spaces between letters in printing. Justin's a TEDx speaker and devoted to his family, his wife, and 4 children. Bob Davidson has a master's degree on aesthetics from Fuller Theological Seminary. He has been a filmmaker for 12 years. He worked for the Young Life organization, a national Christian organization that reaches out to youth. For the last 5 years, he's been creative producer for Rule29. He's also the co-founder of Project rednoW, which is, think about it, wonder backwards. And it is an experimental community committed to exploring the art of wonder through music, film, philosophy, design, and storytelling. Check it out, rednow.com. It's really fascinating. And Bob's been my contact for setting up this talk, and I get messages from him like, at the Sundance Film Festival with Justin, we'll get back to you. So I'm not sure how they actually get any work done. We're just glad to have them here. And Bob has a wife and 3 children. And our sequence tonight will be that first Bob will begin, then Justin will come up, and Bob will finish. Then after that, we'll have a period of question and answer. So looking forward to a good discussion. And these guys are wanderers, but our mic only is good here. So they might feel a little confined, but hopefully they'll feel warmly welcomed by us. So thank you to Bob Davidson and Justin Ahrens.
All right, yes, it is good to see everyone. And I am not quite sure how this is going to go with staying put, so we will try, okay? Yes, as Ed said, my name is Bob. Very excited to be here. Good to see some people I know and many that I do not. So I know some of you are from the community. How many of you are actually students here, just out of curiosity? And how many of you are getting extra credit for being here? Oh, just 3. That's impressive. We'll welcome you 3. Hopefully it's entertaining at some level. So as Ed said, this is just to give you a little context of, this is my family. My wife, Anna, and I have 3 kids, Grace, Emily, and Phineas. And little side note about my family is, so when we were first having kids, my name being Bob, I've always been fascinated by I really like palindromes because my name is a palindrome. And I found it really unique that my wife's name is Anna and is also a palindrome. And I thought, how rare is this, that 2 palindromes marry? And I tried to have an all palindrome family and name all of our kids palindromes. And I wanted to name Grace Ellie and spell it E-L-L-E. And Emily, I wanted to name Hannah. And I really like this idea of naming my son, so that when someone asked him what his name was, he would say, and then it would be this cyclical argument. So anyway, side note. I work at, as it said, Rule29, just to give you context, so this is where both Justin and I are. It's a 100-plus-year-old house in the western suburbs of Chicago. There's 10 of us there that do a variety of jobs, from designers, creatives to strategy and storytelling as well. So a fun place that we get to work and play often. So also, as of 6 weeks ago, me and my wife opened up a cafe and coffee shop in Glen Ellen, Illinois, which is also in the western suburbs. And my wife's a bit of a foodie and a chef, and this has been a project in the works for a number of years. And so that's also a little bit about us. It's called Blackberry Market. So yeah, if you're ever in Glen Ellen, stop by. So here's what we're talking about today. Wonder. The notion of wonder, kind of an interesting topic. and a little bit of elusive. My thought is really how we get into this is actually just to tell you a story that served a little bit of a basis of eventually studying wonder in graduate work, and the idea of it, both as it relates to aesthetics, as it relates to theology and wonder. So I have two vivid images in my head of coming home to work. Coming home from work one day and entering my house, and my then 8-year-old daughter Grace, she's always been a reader. She loves reading and was, she had the option of kind of going outside and playing. She would prefer to be on the couch, curled up next to a book, and she would be enthralled. And I come in the door one day, and I'm gonna step away just for a second. I hope this is okay. So I come in one day, and there's the door in my family room, and we have the couch on the left-hand side, and she's there, and she's just entrenched. And I say, Grace, what are you doing? She's like, I'm reading. I was like, what are you reading? She says, the Chronicles of Narnia. And so she had just picked up this book and was reading it for the first time. We had talked about it a little bit, and she had just never quite got to reading it, and all of a sudden she's reading it. She's quite entrenched, okay? So that one image that I have of my family room and Grace at the age of 8. I come in the very next day. Same routine, come in from work, open the door. I start to put my stuff down, and Grace is in the middle of the family room with her legs crossed. And she's sitting on the floor, and she is fixated on this wall. And we have a TV, and we have a bookshelf on one side and another bookshelf on the other side of the TV. And I go, Grace, what are you doing? No response. So I take my shoes off, hang up my jacket, putting my stuff away. I go, Grace, what are you doing? And she is just fixated, doesn't really respond. And so I'm like, okay. So I go sit down on the couch that I had seen her on earlier, and I say, Grace, are you okay? And she kind of sits there for a little bit, and then she says, Dad, can you move that bookshelf? And I go, what? No. We have this tall bookshelf that's on the other side of the TV, and it's tall enough where you kind of need a hook so it prevents it from falling forward. And so there's all these books. I'm like, no, I'm not going to move the bookshelf. I don't want to mess. All the books are going to fall. And she goes, Dad, I really want you to move that bookshelf. And I'm thinking to myself, like, why does she want? I said, did you drop something behind it? What's the deal? And she doesn't want to tell me. And I just find that quite interesting. I sit there and I think about it for a second, and then it just dawns on me. I'm like thinking to myself, okay, I know she can get enthralled with something, and if you know the story of Chronicles of Narnia, that it's based off of this wardrobe. Well, we don't have a wardrobe in our house, and the bookshelf is the closest thing to it. And so I know that she wants to get behind this bookshelf. And if you don't know the story of the Chronicles of Narnia, there's a whole world behind this wardrobe. And so you could tell that she is interested to see, is there a world behind this bookshelf? And so I'm like, oh, great. Here I am as a father, and I have this child and engrossed with his imagination, and I don't know what to do. And she says, can you move? And I said, well, Grace, I don't know if it's a good idea. I know you read the story in Narnia. I don't know that Narnia is behind the bookshelf, And she stops for a moment, pauses, and says, Dad, well, how do you know? And there it was for me, and I'm not kidding. I was silent for about 60 seconds. And as I sat there and contemplated her question, I realized there she had encountered something. She was in it. And the question that I have really is what is it? Plato says it this way. He says it as the beginning. Philosophy begins in wonder, and she was in this sense of wonder. Swiss theologian Karl Barth says it this way. Whoever begins to concern himself with theology also begins to concern himself from first to last with wonder. It's an interesting idea. Just as a little, I don't know the room here. I know a few people in here, and I know that I'm not sure kind of what you're coming into the room with. And obviously there's this is, sponsored by the Geneva Campus Ministries, and there's this, the baseline of this lecture series is, having to do with your faith and how that plays itself out in life. And so I know that there's maybe some in the room that, that's maybe there's an intrigue there. There's some folks that have some sense of faith. There's some that's probably much like I've been much of my life as a little, I would call myself a disgruntled Christian for a variety of reasons. And I'll explain more about that in a little bit. But here's what I'd like to do as we ask this question: what is it? I'd love to kind of break this up in a few parts. One is I'm just going to kind of give some theory a little bit on wonder and some background of it. We're going to talk a little bit about what that has to do with how we see the world, what we do with that. And also we're going to look at, how that plays out as it relates to a discipline of seeing, as you might have seen by the title. So there's few people that, I'm not sure if you can see that, but there's few people that have actually studied wonder at any significant level. And there was a philosopher, a Harvard grad, named Sam Keen, that did quite a bit of study on wonder. And in his book, Apology, that's what that says up there, Apology for Wonder, he defined it and broke it down into a couple of ways. There's really two ways in which you can look at wonder. One is as a response. It's a verb. When you respond to a particular something, and we're in a state of, we wonder about something. I wonder about life. I wonder about, what I'm going to eat for my next meal. I mean, it could be as simple as that. At the same time, wonder can be seen and studied as an object, and more of as a noun. And that, to me, that's actually a little more of an interesting topic. Wonder as an object. And the way he talks about it, and he breaks it down into two categories. One is ontological wonder, would be first. And I don't know if you know the study of ontology, but it's really the study of the nature of being. And it's not necessarily concerned with what something is, but that it is at all. And it's this notion that it really is a baseline for some of the most profound questions that we ask. What is the meaning of life? What does it mean to be human? What do I glean from the fact that I exist at all? And on the contrary, as opposed to ontological wonder, mundane wonder is not the study that something exists, but it's actually the study of the what something is. And so it's a little more concrete, a little more easy for us to understand. It's rooted in people, into things. We can look at a particular something as the birthplace of this wonder. So it's kind of an interesting concept that I think most of the time when you hear the idea of wonder, we think of it as that verb. But I want to explore for just a little bit of what it would be like to understand wonder as a thing that you actually can encounter, an actual encounter or something tangible that is seemingly intangible. So a little interesting. Best example I might have for this is I'm at breakfast a couple months ago, and I walk outside a breakfast, and I see this plastic bag floating in the air, And there was this little cafe in downtown Wheaton called Eclectic, and I'm outside, and it's actually around these bushes, and it gets caught up in the air, and then it's right by, it ends up getting hung up in this tree right above my car. And every time I see this plastic bag, it reminds me of something, and I'm curious if it reminds anybody else of the same thing. But if any of you have seen the 1999 film American Beauty, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. American Beauty, which won the Oscar in '99, is the epitome of understanding mundane wonder. And actually, I would say both mundane and ontological wonder. We have this boy, and I'm actually going to show you a clip just to give you a context. A boy named Ricky Fitz, who becomes obsessed with filming everything, and he has an entire wall of videotapes of things that he's encountered, and he invites a girl over to his place and asks this question: "Do you know what the most beautiful thing I've ever filmed is?" And this is how he describes it.
You want to see the most beautiful thing I've ever filmed? It was one of those days where it's a minute away from snowing, and there's this electricity in the air. You can almost hear it, right? And this bag was just dancing with me. Like a little kid begging me to play with it. For 15 minutes. That's the day I realized that there was this entire life behind things. And this incredibly benevolent force that wanted me to know that there was no reason to be afraid.
So this is what he says. He says, "That's the day I realized that there was this entire life behind things, and this incredible benevolent force that wanted me to know that there was no reason to be afraid, ever." Is a plastic bag. Alan Ball, who directed and wrote the film, I love that this. I don't know where it was inspired from, if it was an encounter that he had, but it's this incredibly mundane encounter with this plastic bag that actually led beyond itself. And as I thought about it myself, when I was 9 years old, I took piano lessons, and I don't know how many of you have done piano and have ever had the experience of childhood or piano recitals, but I have a vivid early memory that I've actually never shared publicly before, because it's a little odd, but we're talking about wonder and ontology, so whatever. I'm in this, my parents' station wagon, okay, so that dates it first of all, and it had wood paneling on it. It'd be a great vintage car right now, if anybody could find one. But I'm 9, we're traveling to this piano recital, and I've kind of fallen down on the seat a little bit, and my cheek is pressed up against the back of the seat, which is this tan vinyl. And I remember my cheek just kind of getting hot, and it's just kind of like uncomfortable. But for some reason, I can't move. My eyes are absolutely fixated on this vinyl. And I remember being there. I remember about 5-10 minutes going by and it feeling like this is the longest experience I've ever had of sitting in one place still. And I remember my parents got out of the car and told me to come in. I acted like I was coming in, and I didn't move. And it was the first time that I actually was started to process, because I went up with my cheek pressed up and my body pressed up against this hot vinyl. I could feel myself breathing. And it was the first time ever that I actually contemplated my existence and thought to myself, this is interesting. The fact that I can breathe and that I exist at all. And it was, I'm sure there was a number of reasons this was kind of birthed, this encounter and experience happened. But to me, it was really the tipping point was this vinyl of all things. And that's a very interesting notion when we look at the encounter of wonder and how it rears its head in some of the most unlikely places, such as a plastic bag, such as such as vinyl. They're a little harder maybe to grasp or understand, as often we look at things from a little more from a sensational side of things, more sensational experiences. And I've had many. I remember, if I think of, and maybe it's an interesting question to ask yourself, what's your first experience and encounter with wonder? When did you have, when was the first sense of wonder where you contemplated something at that level, something that pushed you a little bit beyond the place where you currently existed, that you currently were at? I have early memories of the first time I ever saw Les Mis in the theater in New York. I had that encounter and experience. The birth of Grace, my first, the first child, and kind of being mesmerized by it. I was having this discussion earlier with my friend Joe, and the first time I remember getting asked the question by a professor at one point. It says, what is the most spiritual experience that you've ever had? It's kind of an open blanket question, and I remember thinking about it and realizing, if I'm perfectly honest with myself, the most spiritual experience I've ever had was actually at this concert. As if any of you have ever been to a U2 show, you would recognize this, but this was the U2 Elevation Tour in 2001. I happened to be really close. I took this picture. I was on the first row, and I've been to many shows before. I've seen U2 before, but there was about a 8 to 12 minute period in this show where they did a series of songs. One was my favorite U2 song called Bad, and they went into a version of a song called 40, and went into a couple of renditions of a few other songs. And it was the first time that I actually welled up and started crying, and didn't know quite what was happening. I mean, there's thousands of people in this space, and I'm going, what is going on? And I walked out of there, and I remember having this conversation with a group of friends and said, that felt like the spiritual encounter. And, in many ways, sometimes it was a better experience than I have at church. And for a variety of reasons, which would be an interesting discussion in and of itself, Sam Keen said this: wonder and awe are closely associated with the experience of the holy. Both have as their object a mystery that is at once awful and desirable. The only distinction between the two lie in forms in which religious experiences articulated become rigid, and a gulf open between the sacred and the secular. And I think often for those of you that come from a faith background, what is sometimes hard is that these two get separated. The sacred and the secular, they're treated as two completely different things. But I would argue that both, I would agree with Keen here that both are an encounter with what Paul Tillich, who is also a philosopher, a theologian, that would say is ultimate reality. there's an encounter with a reality that that exists irregardless of the forms in which you experience it in. Irregardless if we're in a particular a church building, or in this case the United Center in downtown Chicago. And it's the first time I've actually ever really considered that and said, often we look at faith things and spiritual things as bound by a certain particular context. I can experience or talk about it here because it says Geneva, Christian Ministries or whatever, but outside of this, particular spaces, it doesn't necessarily work. My question is that the object, the wonder in which that thing in which you encounter, is it the same thing irregardless? I'm actually experiencing and encountering a reality that exists beyond my comprehension, something that brings me to a state of wonder. And I think that honestly, we often view, I think sometimes we view Scripture, or the Bible as something that is true authority or truth where it lies just on the text. That we see something where from a book standpoint, and this doesn't even just the Bible, has to do with any piece of writing, is that we look at it as its essence is the words that exist on the page. And really, I think we're way off, and we often approach it wrong. Where Scripture is meant to be read in a way where it points beyond itself. There's a reality that exists behind it, and often we can't see that. We just look straight, and our experience stops here as with the words on the page, and we don't really see it as pointing beyond itself. And I would argue that maybe that's not the case, and maybe they're just like Ricky Fitzy is with the plastic bag that says, it's the first time I realized there was something beyond it. And that's the thing that I'm interested in, that which is beyond. What is this kind of ultimate reality? The last little bit I'll share before I turn it over to Justin here is, one of the things I'm most fascinated by when I studied story and wonder was particularly how Christ in Scripture really, how he told stories. And that's what his most prominent form of communication was speaking in parables. And there's one of my favorite stories out of Scripture comes in a passage called Matthew 13, where he's telling the story, and he says, let me tell you a story about this farmer, and there's these seeds, and he scatters them on the ground, and he goes on and tells this story that often I think we read Scripture as very prescriptive, a prescriptive matter. But really, I think in many ways, Christ was speaking of a reality and speaking of it as a descriptive deal. We're saying, I'm telling you the way things are. This isn't a hypothetical situation, but I'm going to tell you these are the way things are. And he goes on, the disciples question him and says, why do you tell stories? And this is his response. He says, I tell stories to create readiness, to nudge the people towards receptivity and to receptive insight. In their present state, they can stare till doomsday and not see it, listen till they're blue in the face and not get it. I don't want Isaiah's forecast repeated all over again. Your ears are open, but you don't hear a thing. Your eyes are awake, but you don't see a thing. These people are blockheads. This is the Message translation, by the way, for those of you. They stick their fingers in their ears so they won't listen. They screw their eyes shut so they won't have to look, so they won't have to deal with me face to face and let me heal them. He's basically saying, here's the deal. There's a difference in experiencing a reality when you've got your eyes closed. There's a difference in experiencing reality when you have your ears shut. And I think in an age in which, I think I read the other day, there's like 35 gigabytes of information processed in a day that we as individuals consume. it's pretty easy to walk around with our eyes shut. We just become numb. We become numb and stale to a reality that exists around us. So we're going to explore a little bit more about that for the rest of our time. I'm going to pass it over to Justin as he's going to take it from there.
Thanks, Bob. I just love saying Bob. I'm going to call him Robert just because that kind of annoys him a little bit. No, I'm kidding. How many have actually read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? Oh, awesome. So let me tell you a quick story because I love the introduction that Bob gave. We have the privilege to work with Wheaton College, and supposedly they have the wardrobe that was in C.S. Lewis's attic. And so one day we're going home. Actually, I was just by myself after meeting at Wheaton, and I was like, I'm going to stop in and see this wardrobe. And so I get out of the car, and I go into this room, and no one's there, and I open up the door, and I stick my hand all the way through. And I was like, and I close the door. And then I go like this, because there's the lady that worked in that area right there. And she goes, oh, honey, people do that all the time. And that made me so happy, because I think that there's a point where we lose that appreciation of wonder, or even let ourselves go there. And I feel very blessed to have Bob in my life. When we first met, it was right in a time in my career where I wanted to see the world differently, and I didn't quite know how to do that. So let me give you a little quick context. So I am a dad. I have 4 kids. This is the picture my wife would want me to show you, but this is really who we are. And I love this one because my son has a claw, and I don't know what that means, but it's awesome. But one thing I realized is that I grew up with a single mom most of my life, and what she was really amazing at was, and I didn't get this at the time, is she would talk to anybody, to a fault. We'd sit and she'd meet someone on the, in the store, and we'd talk forever. And I was like, oh, Mom, seriously, I got to go home and watch cartoons. Like, there's way cooler stuff going on. And I never really appreciated that about my mom. Another thing I didn't appreciate about my mom is how great she was with extending our budget. This is me. That actually is a bowl cut. Like, literally, my mom put a bowl on my head and cut my hair. And what I love about that is that my mom would sit and she would tell me stories. We'd make up stories together. And I never felt, we didn't have a lot, but I never felt like I didn't have a lot. I never felt like I wasn't loved. And my mom always created this atmosphere, this culture in our family of being creative. And she wanted me to live the way that I was created to be. And I didn't get that as a kid. In fact, my mom had me when she was in high school, and we moved around a lot, and she decided to try marriage 3 times, which the second one didn't go that great. In fact, we at the time, my stepdad moved us out to Arizona and away from my family. And at the time, as a young kid, I doodled a lot. And I read weird things like mythology and stuff, but like really to a geeky level. And so I drew stuff all the time in class. But if you want to see a witness of my design brilliance, here's my little logo. J.A., Justin Ahrens. For you designers out there, come on. But I've always kind of tried to wonder, what was I here for? What was I meant to be? Why do I process information differently? I didn't really get it. And so as I sat and I thought about these things, and actually as I was exploring, kind of trying to relate this concept to people that we'd go around and talk about, one of the parts of the design process that I really enjoy is research. And so I always love facts and that sort of thing to kind of give me perspective. So let me tell you one fact that I don't understand at all. There's 7 billion people in this world. I have no idea what that means. I know it's a lot, but 7 billion. Like, I think I know what $1 million is now. And 7 billion is such a big, scary number to me. But one number that I totally get is this one. And I think to myself, and this is what I asked my designers, and I'm going to propose to you tonight. So you're one person, right? Do you think that what you do can change the world? I mean, really, do you think what you can do to change the world? For designers, like I tell my designers, like, do you think design can change or affect the world? So let me ask you guys, do you think what you do can change the world? Just raise your hand. Okay, not bad. So let's make it more personal. Do you think what you do for a profession every day, like something you physically did yourself, could change the world? All right. Less people. Well, I think that the reason I bring this up is Robert. I'm also kind of a quote nerd. I love keeping quotes. If you look at my iPhone, there's like pages of quotes, some of which I need to take better notes. I'm like, what does that mean? But one of my favorite quotes that he revealed to me is this one here. It's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see. And when he first gave me that quote, we're sitting here having a conversation. As you can tell from his talk so far, some deep conversations, sometimes ones that need beer because I'm not quite sure where we're going. And that's totally fine. No, but I was sitting there thinking about that one day. I'm like, I don't know. I actually don't know what that means. Like, I think I understand what look means, right? So I do what anyone would do. I'd Google it. Right? Go to the dictionary. And so this is one of the definitions of looking: to view something for a reason with an intention. Okay, I get that. I'm pretty sure. But then as I was looking through the definitions of see, this is what came up: to notice something you weren't looking for. I love that. I love those moments in life when something appears that you notice that you weren't looking for. And I thought to myself, as a creative, how do I bring that more into my day-to-day? Because that's really where the magic happens. When I can go to a client and have a solution or some idea that to them comes out of total left field, but totally makes sense and has them see something differently. So I wanted to explore how that was. And I want to try to think about how do I see? So I ask you, how do you see? And if that's a little vague to you, let me give you a different reference point. So I want you to think back to the first time someone in your life, similar to what Bob was saying about wonder, but think about the first time someone in your life did something that made you see differently. For me, it was in the 5th grade. I am the tall gentleman in the far right. This is Gigi Gillespie, who I was in love with. She was the best kickballer on the team. This dude, I have no idea what his name was. He freaked me out. And what is he doing in that picture? I'm assuming he's looking at his shoes. But the guy that changed my life was this guy right here, Mr. H. And let me tell you why he did. This was the time I was telling you about where I'd moved to Arizona. My stepdad and I were not getting along at all. I was kind of in my mythical creature drawing on everything Napoleon Dynamite stage. And I was doing horrible in school. And so one day he was walking by my desk and he stopped and he picked up my notebook. I thought I was in trouble because I was supposed to be doing math. And I was drawing like 1s and 2s having a battle. 2s won, by the way. It was amazing. And he looked at me and he pulled me over to his desk and he goes, "Hey, Justin, every week we have to do a book report." And I was like, I realize this. I haven't done one yet. He goes, "How about you go home, read whatever book interests you, draw the essence of the book or what the book's about, and present it to class." I said, wait a second. You want me to read a book and then draw and present it? He's like, yes. I'm like, oh, this is a miracle. Mr. H fell on his head. He wants me to go do something that I do every day in class. This is awesome. So I remember I ran home, and for the first time I can remember in years, I was like so excited about a school lesson. And so I drew I was reading a book about gnomes. Nerd, I know. They're funny little creatures. And I drew this picture of a gnome, and I presented the story, and a couple of things happened that day. One, before, obviously I didn't know what it was. I became a designer that day. I realized that that's who I am. That's how God made me. 2, Mr. H took the time to see me for who I was and how I was made and allowed me the opportunity. And I think that I had this discussion with my friends, and we were talking about Mr. H, and I'd never even thought about it that way until we had this conversation. And so they encouraged me to contact him, and I'll come back to that story in a minute. So fast forward to me as a grown-up, and I'd been at Rule29 for a couple of years, and there's a topic that kept coming to my mind that I didn't understand, and that was, for some reason, I felt like I was supposed to do something with extreme poverty in Africa. Now, I'm a dad of 4. I run a company. Me going off to Africa for a couple of weeks was not in the cards. That was not something that was even on. If you asked me to write 1,000 things I'm going to do, that would not be one of them. And so the whole story about how I got there is completely cool and exciting. But basically, I was like, how can I help my team, my Rule29 family, see the world bigger? How can I help them see it bigger than they were? And how can we make an impact and do something differently? And then for me personally, how do I understand extreme poverty? So, for example, I watch American Idol, I'll admit it, with my kids, of course. And Justin Bieber's on my iPod because of my daughter. It's not because of me. But we were watching American Idol, and there was a special called Idols Give Back, and during this whole session, they talked about malaria nets. And my daughter asked me, Dad, why do they need malaria nets? Why are we always talking about Africa? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Let's do some research. So that's one of the catalysts that kind of led me to find out about Africa. Was 2 months later, I'm in one of my friend's cabins in Arizona. I'm telling him about this, and he starts laughing. I'm like, what's so funny? He's like, oh, my son just became the CEO of an organization called Life in Abundance that works in 7 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and they're looking for someone to help tell their story. We just happen to give a percentage of our time to nonprofits or NGOs, and I thought, oh, that's interesting how that all kind of worked out. So a couple months later, we're having a conversation, and I said, hey, I would love to help you. And he's like, we'd love you to help us too, but we don't want you to spend 1 second working with us until you go and see. And I go, so you're not going to take my free work unless I go to Africa? And he's like, yes. And I thought, that's a great selling pitch. So I was intrigued. And so I had the opportunity to go with one of my best friends who was a photographer, and we went to sub-Saharan Africa to see their work. So for those of you who don't know, we're talking about Kenya, Ethiopia, Sudan, Eritrea, Somalia, Djibouti, which is just fun to say. So after I made a decision, I went approximately 8,000 miles east for my first trip about 5 years ago to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, which is the capital city there, and also the rural areas. Then I also went to Nairobi, Kenya, and went to Kibera, which is one of Africa's largest slums, in some rural areas. And to tell you that this changed my life is an understatement. I don't know how many of you have been to a developing country or have been in a slum setting, but it is a multi-sensory experience. Obviously, the smell is there, but it's all around you. There's there's obviously a visual part of it, but there's a physical part of it, and then there is definitely a spiritual part of it. And part of that is something that just kind of starts tearing you apart and kind of eroding your understanding of the world. In fact, it's one of these times where I was right here in the setting, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do? What can one person possibly do? And I started thinking about Mr. H a little bit. I was like, well, maybe I can do something like that. I don't know. A couple minutes later, that went away because we went to another part of Kibera, and I was just floored. I had enough. I couldn't do it. So I was off in the corner helping this guy make rice, and I was like, I just can't handle this. How do you do this every day? It just seems like there's no hope. And so he took me over and took me to this eye clinic where I saw this little girl get her glasses for the first time. And as soon as she put the glasses on, she started looking at her hands and her feet. And I was like, oh, what is she doing? And he's like, oh, she's never seen her hands clearly. She's always had blurry vision her whole life. And I was just like, that's amazing. That's why you do it. I want to do stuff like that. And so I thought this would be an amazing experience to bring something like this back to my team, but also to the people we work with. So I left there excited. I was on cloud nine. I couldn't wait to help tell this story in some way that'd make a difference. And then when I got home, I had this email on my desk from the guy I went with, and he goes, just so you know, I want you to, now that you've been there, I want you to understand these statistics. And that's, 20,000 children under the age of 5 die from preventable diseases in the area that we were in. 80% of the world's HIV AIDS cases are primarily in the area that I was in. And this is just a general world stat. 1/3 of the world lives on income less than $2 a day. So now I had no idea what I was going to do. I had this incredible tension of these two worlds existing, right? I had the world where I could go to the grocery store and buy like 18 different kinds of bread, right? And then there's this other reality that is going on halfway across the world. So I was kind of depressed again. And for whatever reason, I went to the Gap. I don't often go to the Gap, but I was at the Gap this day. And I saw this saying, many of you have probably seen it, but be the change you wish to see in the world. And again, I was thinking about that as I thought about the Thoreau quote. I'm like, do I really understand that, what that means? And then I was walking out and I thought, well, yeah, I got to do something. Why don't I start with what I'm good at, which is helping my clients tell stories and do design that hopefully is impactful and memorable. And so just to give you, again, a context of where I was at, we helped this organization redesign their logo. We started designing their materials to help educate those who wanted to know more about the areas in Africa they worked in. Talked about empowerment, went through strategy, redid their whole online and social media delivery system, communication system, created a fundraising book of the experience that we had that first trip, did some advertising with different organizations that we helped put together. And then I also, after telling this story, I had a bunch of design friends who came together and did this poster together to help raise money for one of the projects I was telling them about. And so I was wondering, like, what can I do with this? Like why do I need to talk more about that? And I think that no matter what you do, it's important to try to inspire people to see beyond themselves. Because we have this great opportunity in community to help others see. So let me give you another example of that. So as I was kind of going through this process, starting the design work, Brian, my friend who went with me to Africa, was doing some editing of some film that we had done. And he goes, hey, I want you to watch this because I know you're having a tough day today. But do you remember those kids that the locals that we interviewed thought were trash and just were helpless and couldn't really do much? Do you remember those kids? I'm like, yeah, that day we shot their portraits. He's like, yeah. He's like, watch this and tell me what you see. So I ask you the same thing. What do you see here? For me, what I loved about that moment, when I looked at that, I realized that all those statistics that I was looking at and that overwhelmed feeling of tension that I had was completely erased at that moment when I finally realized that the people I was working with were people. And I never, for whatever reason, looked at them like that. I looked at them as a statistic, or someone so much different than me, or that we had nothing in common, which all of those things are not true. And so for me, as a creative, I realized, wow, design matters. What I do matters. What you do matters. You were designed specifically to do something uniquely for you, to you. And I think that until we accept that and understand that and realize that, then I think there's a great deal of satisfaction or purpose that we miss out on in our life. And so at that moment I decided I'm going to talk differently, I'm going to look differently, I'm going to see differently. And so really what happened from just a practical standpoint was the work that Rule29 started doing totally changed. We all of a sudden were getting calls from big organizations to do their social focused work. Clients that we worked with for a long time wanted us to tell their story in a way that, really got to the essence of who they were. And they wanted us to work with them in a way to help bring in the social element, to help them have some cause that they could be a part of. And so that was incredibly rewarding. In fact, the photographer I was telling you about asked me to do a brochure for him. Like, oh, what do you want to do? Do you want to shoot, or show all the different things that you take photos of? He's like, no, I want to take the portraits we did of Africa and ask people when they view my work if the subjects that I shot are worthy of their time, worthy of them to be seen. And so we did this great project. And I'll show you a couple slides here. And I thought it was incredible because here we go from a commercial photographer who usually would show like golf clubs or, food that he shoots to shooting people and challenging those who he potentially could work with, what they think of these images. On the heels of that, we also started working on some different storytelling. Since I didn't get extreme poverty, I'm sure a lot of other people didn't get it. So we went back to Nairobi a few years later and did a documentary called This Is My Normal that compares their normal with our normal and really doesn't answer any questions, but just shows you the reality of what extreme poverty is like. So this is just some of the materials that we created because of the time, I won't show you the clip, but if you wanted to see the trailer, you can go to thisismynormal.com and watch it. Again, here's just some of the pieces that we did for it. What's incredible about that is I realized that poverty is so much more complex than I could possibly even understand it, but I had to do something. And so I did what I was made to do and continued to be open. Because one of the trips that we had over there, we were talking about just the design process and how it can lead you to a lot of different things. And for those of you, I don't know if you know what microfinance projects are, but this organization that we work with basically gives loans to people who are in the slums and helps train them in a skill. They do their work, they get paid, they slowly pay back the loan, and that money is given to the next person and on down the line. And so they said, hey, what could you do to help us with that? And I'm like, I don't know, give me all the parameters. And so my team and I collaborated both with some people in the States and then some of our African brothers and sisters and came up with an idea to make shoes. And so I'd never made flip-flops before, and I know more about women's sandals than maybe some women in here, which is exciting for my wife because now I'm a great shop partner. I like shopping before anyway, so don't let me fool you. But we went through this whole process of helping design shoes and working with trying to develop patterns that they could develop in the slums of Kibera. And in November, we finished our first big shoe production 3 years after the idea was born. And so that, for me, was personally exciting. This is one of the first pairs that we got from Africa that actually had the toe tong thing in the right place. I don't know the terminology, but basically this was something we helped design with them. The bottoms are made out of recycled tires. The tops are locally sourced material. The beading is one of the skills that we discovered that many Kenyan women know, so we included that into the design. And so we got to be a part of working with the women in the slums to develop this shoe. And if you go to conjo.is, you can actually check the shoes out. And if you purchase them, 100% of the proceeds go back into the program. So I show you that because I would have never gone here, done this, if I wouldn't have got out of my comfort zone, if I wouldn't open myself up to trying to see the world differently, and really just trying to engage. So I don't think you have to go to Africa to make a difference. But before we get to that point, I want to talk about one quick thing, and that is the concept of practicing to pause every day. Bob and I were having this debate 2 years ago, and I had to write an article for this blog called Rock Paper Ink, and so they wanted me to do something about being creative, and I kept thinking to myself, but what really matters? And for me, at the point in my career, I was not taking the time to pause and see the world around me. And I'm a huge social media guy. I love Instagram. I take pictures like crazy, but sometimes I was just taking pictures just to take pictures, and I wasn't really trying to be present in the moment. And so I wrote a post and asked anyone who read it to, for a month, try to take a photo every day and hashtag it see different. But when you take this photo, hopefully it'll be during the time where you're actually setting everything aside and just being present. And so here are some of the photos that I got from different friends. There's one photo in here my wife wishes I'd take out, but it just cracks me up. It's my son at the pool. The best thing is like, Dad, look, see different. And I was like, thanks, son. But I think what really, one of the things I kind of learned in that month is that if I don't create space for wonder in my life, there's absolutely no chance it would appear. Now, just because I create space doesn't mean it'll just pop up and be like, hi, I'm Wonder, and this is a great moment. But if I at least don't prepare myself to try to pause and see the world around me, it's not going to happen. So some of my designers get really uptight about some of the things that we do. And so I always tell them to don't ever stop having fun. And then right on the heels of that, I give them a quote like this. This is an Einstein quote. He who can no longer pause and stand wrapped in awe is as good as dead. His eyes are closed. And I was debating this idea with one of my designers, and they said, it'd be great if you would give us an opportunity to, do some of the stuff you're talking about. And so I think often, at least for me, if you don't quite know where to go with a certain idea or where to take it, my piece of advice is just to do something. And that sounds really simple, but it is that simple. So, for example, my designer's like, well, when you talk about being a better storyteller or how to see different, how to experience wonder, what do you mean? And so from this idea came this concept called Stories Matter. And what I told my designers was this. I'm going to give you a couple days and a camera crew, and I want you to go around your community, our community, and find someone ordinary, or find someone that people would just say is ordinary. And I want you to interview them. I want you to find out their story. And I want you just to create a moment to engage in a different way. And so we've done a couple. I want to show you a couple clips here quick. This first one was a friend of mine, Wendy. I'm going to play that full one, and then it'll be back to Bob. But while we're filming Wendy, we found out that she, for most of her life, had supported refugees, and she had a lost boy from Sudan staying with her. And we sat him down and asked him a few questions, and this is some of his responses.
The day I would arrive in the United States, I was just going to take a shower, but I was having a difficulties of taking shower because there was no shower in the camp when I was there. So the life here in the United States was a little bit difficult for me to go about it. And the other thing was when I go to the store, I went to the oldie store, and the door as it started opening itself alone, I was standing there to see who is opening the door for me, and I saw nobody. Another different thing just come in. That was the first time I saw the snow. So the snow fell, and I was really getting nervous. What kind of thing is this one? It's getting cold, and there is something white falling down in the sky. So it was really kind of new life that I went in by that time. But at the moment, it's okay. I'm getting used to it.
So every time I see him, he lives in our community, and it's cold out. He's just like, all you see is this much of his face, you know? And I'm like, how you doing, Archangelo? And he's like, but let me play you the full interview of Wendy. This will really kind of sum up for you, I think, one of the points I'm trying to make here. So here you go.
I'm Wendy Dwyer, and I'm the mother of 4 children ranging in age from 25 to 10, and I'm an artist, and that I've been since I was 3 years old. That's what I still love to do, is to make things and look at things and choose things, making choices. I guess someone told me that artists make choices, and so I always thought of art as deciding things. I am a pen and ink illustrator, but that is just a small part of what I do. What I really like to do is to direct large groups of people to work together and create community art. The project that I really enjoyed for Kenya Children's Fund was for a school in the Dandora slum of Nairobi. And a lot of the kids had never touched art supplies, so they loved it. The little kids would do the yeah as they were mixing colors. The older kids, they just try to stretch it out forever. Even if they're only making one person, they tried to add as much as they could. To me, art is more than what I see and what I make. It's deciding, what I believe and how I'm going to do things. When I found out I was losing my sight, I didn't know I was losing my sight. I had gone to the doctor because I thought it was my brain, because I was having a hard time recognizing people. I kept thinking it's just going to turn out to be something really stupid and easy to fix. And that was my attitude through the whole thing until they did the last test. And then sure enough, it was retinitis pigmentosa, which was what we were hoping it wasn't, because there isn't a cure for retinitis pigmentosa at this point. We were going away that next weekend to go camping, and so we dragged the Airstream and everybody down there, and we were camping, and then when it was time to leave, it was the last great week of late summer, so I asked my husband just to leave me there, and so I just spent the week, instead of being in motion all the time and doing all my normal things, I just stared at things, and that was really awesome because it made me look at everything like it was art. So in that way, I'm really glad that part of me is being an artist, because I just appreciate things more, and I'm trying to store it up in my head. And then when people are describing things to me, I think that's going to be a huge blessing. Like, I'm going to ask everybody to describe the exact shade of color, and that, be descriptive, and that'll help people be more artistic themselves, because they'll have to look at things to share it with me. So I think that's been a blessing. Yeah, the person who is having the hardest time with it is my son Riley, who is a freshman, and he and I have always enjoyed art together. So when I was diagnosed, I hadn't realized how much it was upsetting him. The other kids they helped me through. We joke about a lot of things. So my oldest son was really funny and made me laugh a lot. And Tegan, my next oldest son, he was super helpful. What can he do and who can he drive and what can he pick up? Because he's 17, he can drive. But Riley, he just would tear up. He couldn't really even deal with it. And then I realized it's because that's what we share. That's our thing, so. I'm becoming less and less in this world, which is really kind of a good thing, because we're all so geared to become bigger and bigger and bigger and more and more and more. And I don't know that is, I don't know, I think we miss out a lot, always trying to be a step ahead. I think there's certain things about me that will improve the less important, the more less, and I don't know, independent that I become, and the less self-promoting, all the things that we don't even mean to be, I think will probably be good to set aside. It's kind of good because it's made me make some value judgments and realize what the world thinks is important isn't really what I think is important, and that's okay, you know? So it'll be interesting to see if that all pans out. I'll see.
So it was amazing about the interview. Bob and I were asking her questions, and we were about 6 feet away, I think. And she'd already lost that distance of sight. And he and I are bawling. And she's talking about how excited she is about being able to help other people be creative by giving them opportunities to explain, about what they see around them. It was a big change for me. I think one of the things I want to finish with is that as I kind of go through my professional career, I think about how do I see with my heart, and we're trying to figure out how to do that more and more. So one of the things we do, as I talked earlier, is we align ourselves with and/or donate time to a lot of organizations that we are making the world a better place. But to finish the loop on Mr. H, I was telling my guys about this story. And they said, you should contact him. I was like, no, I'm not going to contact him. This is like eons ago. He'll never remember me. So it took me 2 years. I tend to be a little stubborn sometimes. And I got a hold of him, and I was telling him who I was. And he's like, oh, Justin Ahrens, I remember you. And we had this great conversation. We exchanged our addresses, and I sent him a box of work, and it was great, right? And I was like, oh, I said thank you to my teacher. That was cool. And then about 2 weeks after that, I get this tube on my doorstep, and I'm like, oh, sweet. My wife, I collect posters. So I'm like, oh, she bought me a poster. Haha, I got it. Surprise. And then when I opened them up, I almost fell over. Mr. H had kept all of my drawings for all that time, just because he said there was something about me that he always wanted to remember. And so why do you need to see different? Well, if you think for 1 second that you can't make a difference in someone's life, then you are so missing the boat. I had the honor for the first time since 1983 to say thank you to this guy in person. So anyways, I want to end with the fact that when you live authentically how you were made, that is a great opportunity for to experience the cultivation of wonder. And with that, I'll turn you over to Bob.
So I just want to conclude our time. I'm going to give some time for some Q&A here. But, as we look through the notion of wonder and seeing one of the things that I've realized, I'm going to skip a few slides here. If you ever seen smoke, see it. It's great. But the group that Ed had mentioned earlier, rednoW, is a group that we had gotten together just really based on a few questions around the idea of wonder, and it ended up we do a site where we curate film and music and art that has essence of wonder in it. And because of it, we do like a number of films, both new and old, a month. And one of the things that I get asked all the time from an email standpoint, from in person, is what should I see? Okay, I'm interested in this topic. Wonder what films are out there should I see on the Oscar list this year? What do you see? And I think we've quickly realized that we're asking the wrong question. It's the question of what to see is not really hitting it. The real question is, how do you see? And it's a completely different answer, and it's a completely different conversation. But the notion of how you experience something, I think, is much more worthy of our time and consideration than actually what to see. And to me, the question, it's all about posture. And I think in many ways, our film industry and the movie industry, and as Ed mentioned, we go to Sundance every year, and there's a sense that, movies, when you walk into a theater, like, it is, okay, I just paid my $10, got some popcorn, entertain me, and if it's not entertaining, I'm going to tweet about it, blog about it, and say how bad it was or whatever. And we do that with music, we do that with art in general, and we tend to approach things with a very critical mindset based on the sheer fact of whether or not I get entertained and get some value from my time that I've given to it. And I'm not sure that's a worthy use of our time and energy. And I think it's a little more of an interesting experience when you walk in to a theater and not so interested in what we have to say about the film itself, but interested in what the film has to say about us. And I think it's flipping the idea on its head. C.S. Lewis, in his a little essay called An Experiment in Criticism, says this: the first demand of any work of art is to remove yourself. There is no good asking for whether this work before you deserves such a surrender, for until you have surrendered, you cannot possibly find out. I love that idea of when we walk into a room, we walk into a theater, we walk into a show, we walk into a piece of art, we open a book. It is, can I remove myself, surrender to it, see what it has to say about me versus what I have to say about it. Sam Keen says it this way. Did I just miss it? Yeah. Okay. Oh, great. Anyway, he says it this way. He says, to wonder is to die to the self, to seize imposing categories, and to surrender the self to the object. Sorry, I'll put it up here. To wonder is to die to the self, to seize imposing categories, and to surrender the self to the object. Such a risk is taken only because there is the promise of a resurrection of meaning. As I think about it, and the best way to approach how, and we discussed, Ed and I discussed this earlier, is been really fascinated by this idea of, can we develop a discipline of seeing? We develop disciplines in all forms of life, and what if we went about life with a discipline of seeing? And it's an interesting notion. Can I train myself? Can I have a habitual nature in the way I approach and my posture to the world, and seeing a little differently? And a philosopher, John Dillenberger, says this: a discipline of seeing does not come by being told how to see, though this might be helpful, even actually necessary. It comes primarily by seeing and seeing and seeing over and over again. I love that idea. In fact, it was kind of the birthplace of a project with some of the guys in rednoW, where we see 100 films a year. And part of seeing 100 films a year is simply by just showing up and seeing and seeing and seeing and seeing. I think the whole Instagram scene's been pretty interesting, as Justin referenced, of folks that are practicing this notion of seeing the everyday a little bit differently. I'm going to conclude by revisiting the question that my daughter left me with. Hey, Dad, how do you know? How do you know that Narnia's not behind the bookshelf? And when she asked me that, and I sat there and stood, I was being perfectly honest. I didn't. I had never been behind the bookshelf. I didn't know whether Narnia was back there or not. And it seems somewhat absurd, but I think sometimes it's the absurd and where we encounter some of the finest moments and experience of wonder. So I'll leave you with wondering what happened, but I did move the bookshelf, and that's another story of what happened after that. So thank you for being patient and listening and diving into the theory of wonder as well as the act of doing and an exploration of how to see. I think we're going to spend just a couple minutes and some Q&A if you have. Be happy to. If you guys need to leave as well, you can leave as well. So any questions?
Yeah, so the question was, in today's marketing world, is 2 seconds enough to start someone down the road of discovering wonder? Is that a fair?
That's the answer that I would like more than the answer to my question.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, I think what's interesting, here's the one thing that's unpredictable is where people are at. And so one of the challenges that we have in the professional creative world is with people that are getting 38 gigabytes of data a day and processing it. How do you stand out? How do you capture someone's attention? And I'll say without question, it's about the story. And in that 2 seconds, can we relate the beginning, the halfway point, or whatever part of the story that we think is the most fascinating to try to engage someone to be a part of it? And so my answer to that question is our job, what Bob and I work on every day, is do we understand the story we're trying to tell? And then in what way can we give that story across as quickly as possible to help people engage? And then what happens after that is really unpredictable. I'd love to tell you that everything we create creates this amazing experience of wonder. But that really comes down to the individual. So what we try to do is we try to prepare someone to be open and be present at a story as much as we can, and kind of let the rest of it happen on its own.
I would just say sometimes it's because of the overabundance of a particular look, feel, advertising, whatever it is, it's often the things that juxtapose in a harsh sense that are and differentiate themselves that cause you to, like one of the most recent examples is, I don't know if you remember 12 months ago at the Grammys, Chipotle did their first ever TV commercial. I don't know if you've seen this Chipotle commercial, but to me it's the most brilliant commercial that's aired in the last 5 years. And partly the music, the tone, the vibe, the whole thing had nothing to do with burritos. It had to do with life and the way we live. And it was such a harsh juxtaposition to the, cosmetic ad that came right after it, that it forced you to encounter a little bit, where immediately online, the Twitter and whatnot kind of blew up going, that is the best moment of the Grammys by far. And it was this commercial. So, interesting. Other question?
Please raise your hand if you have a question.
I just wanted to ask a philosophical question just to get your take on it. You talked about wonder being a universal thing, but do you think that the things that give us wonder, you talked about other cultures today, the things that give us wonder, human beings in the world, are those universal things? Is that universal, or at least the essence of those things? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, are the things that provide wonder a universal experience? And I think I've had this argument with my philosophy professor at one point, because I think I don't know if there's a philosophy professor in here, but anytime you start to make a universal claim, they get fidgety. Because and I would say the same thing. It is hard. I can't prove it. I can't prove that there's an element of wonder that can rear its head in any situation, any culture. But I would tend to think that some of the innate realities that we are born with allow that to show up. I've always been fascinated by the question of whether or not anybody can walk out of these two doors over here without without the desire to love and be loved. You know, there's a profound, you know, aspect that seems, I can't prove it to be true, but I would think that it's one of the most profound realities that we all experience, that it'd be very hard for you to walk out of this room without the desire to love and be loved. That's interesting to me. So, yes, and the notion, I think, of story is universal, as you know, Justin's whispering to me, which I think is true, and that's historically you could see that. So, other question? Yes.
Do you still have a specific routine to do before, when you start a project?
Do we have a specific routine when we start a project?
What's your creative background?
Sure. I'll go for it, and then you can jump in if you want. I don't think that we have Rule29 as a company does have a process that seems to work more than not. But that said, I think when you're dealing in the creative field and creative space, you have to. We've had these arguments. Can you create wonder? Can you? That was the task, you know, of our team. Is like, create this wonder experience. I don't know that you can do that. Like in many ways, like you think of some of the best art you've ever experienced, the best films that I've ever seen, some of the best music I've ever listened to, all came from these spaces in which they just had to be created. You know, as a musician, it was a filmmaker that sitting on this concept, this idea, this question for years or months, or they woke up one morning and said, I got to do it. I woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning and I was inspired. And I think in some ways that limits that the reality of that you can't always structure. That said, as Justin mentioned, I think the more we give our space, you create space for it, the more likely it could show up. But yes, we do have a process. That's what he's saying. Yeah, we do. Any other questions?
Say something, Justin. Maybe say something about the process.
Oh, sure. Well, when it comes to the design development, we definitely absolutely have a set of steps that we go through, no matter what, whether we're designing a packaging or a website or a coupon for that matter. Absolutely, because I think in development of story and experience, you need to go through the proper steps. Now they tweak a little bit depending on the project, but we very much do.
And what it is in a nutshell? What is it? They want to know.
Ed, you're asking a very long question, or long answer. You guys know what I mean. Basically, when we approach the design process in the sense that we need to we have to first do research and understand the problem from all degrees, for all perspectives. How possibly can I work on a creative solution if I don't understand it from every perspective possible? Then when we come to figure out the medium, like what's the vehicle we're going to use? Is it going to be a social media campaign, website, brand, whatever else? Do we understand the story enough to be able to pick which one of those makes the most sense? And then, and again, I'm giving you the cliff notes here. Then from there, we developed ideas. We put forth our strategy. We make recommendations. Hopefully the client agrees. We definitely want their feedback because it is a collaborative experience, I think. And then from there, we go into development, and that kind of goes all different ways depending on what it is. Yes, sir.
Well, I guess this is a little bit philosophical, but I was wondering, when we behold something or when we wonder about an object, how are we sure we're not just seeing what we want to see, or what that more or less a confirmation bias, or just projecting, what we envision onto that object, or how do we actually see what the object truly embodies in itself? So, I mean, what's the line?
That's a great question. The question was, if once we experience an object, how do we know that we're not just projecting onto it what we want to see? And I think that's it's a brilliant question, and it's a very, very, very difficult thing to dissect, because it's impossible to show up to a particular space or a subject matter without that which I already know and have experienced. And so certainly, I think back on the story I was telling about the vinyl in my car, I'm sure I'm projecting, experience I had 30 minutes earlier. There's all kinds of factors, and it becomes a complex situation. But I think in many ways it's really an epistemological question. The epistemology meaning how do you know something? And I think often that we approach life and things in a direction where it's man to whatever, man to an object, man, woman to God, and that our description, our understanding, of God in this example comes from who we think, who we think He is. And I think what's more interesting to me that I've been exploring, but I don't know that I could describe it very well, is really trying to understand the art of knowing with the reverse. Really, that knowing comes from the other direction, and what if there's this essence, there's a sense, an object of wonder that's actually communicating and trying to reveal itself to me that I'm experiencing. I don't know that there's any way that I can't bring my own baggage and stuff to the table. That certainly plays out. But I that C.S. Lewis quote put up of, I think in some ways I learn and experience a lot more if I can surrender myself as much as I possibly can and let go of my own stuff and see what it has to say about me. That makes sense. It kind of reversed, that the knowledge comes to the other direction. Does that make sense? I think the question is about the sensory experiences of wonder, and I think, I would agree that the sensory plays a major role in many elements. Whether you're talking taste, thinking about like profound experiences you've had with food, when you think of some of the best food that you've ever consumed, and maybe some a response and a reaction from that. I gave a couple examples for me. In fact, one just happened. I was at Sundance, and I was watching a documentary called 20 Feet from Stardom that was about backup singers and how they're really 20 feet so they're some of the best singers in the world, and it was predominantly, the story revolved around this group of African American women who made a living out of being backup singers. And there was a moment in this film where one of them was alone in this room singing just off the cuff, and she hit some kind of note. I don't know what it was, and I just start weeping. Like I was tired. I wasn't like, my posture wasn't, I wouldn't say like great for that experience. This was the 16th film out of 16 films I'd seen in 3.5 days. But I encountered it, and it was undoubtedly the sound that it resonated like throughout my body. So I don't know if that. Sure. Yeah. It's a different experience if I'm in the 300 level, for sure.
I think another thing too, that this is a great question. It's something that Bob and I have debated for a while. I think one of the things that we both try to get across, and that I try to build in my life, is preparing yourself to be open for that possibility. And you can only do that if you create time in your life where you can get out of yourself, if that makes sense. And the reason why rednoW is so great is because often we experience, or we have the opportunity to experience, wonder through pop culture, right? Music, movies. I would debate that those are very spiritual things. And so, yeah, I love that concept, and I think that it's important for us to take more time to try to immerse ourselves in that possibility to see what happens.
We need to wrap up. Any last words that you want to? Is that a pass or?
That was be wonderful.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank
for
you.
coming, and thank you, Bob and Justin.
You're watching City Channel 4. On TV, online, on demand, on Facebook, and now on the go on your mobile device.